A brutal silence fell over one of the most upscale restaurants in downtown Lamont, as if lightning had torn through the stillness of a summer night. Conversations stopped. Forks froze midair, and every gaze turned toward a secluded table at the back of the room. Darren Whitmore, a wealthy light-skinned businessman, known for his commanding tone and cold stare, rose to his feet. His charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, caught the golden glow of the crystal chandeliers, every crease adding weight to the authority he radiated. His face turned crimson with rage, eyes locked on the young black waitress standing before him. Lena Moore was standing but trembling, trying to hold herself upright through the tension. "I don't understand how a place as reputable as the Looking Glass could hire someone like you," he snapped, voice like a blade. Each word hit like a slap in the heavy silence. His gaze, full of contempt, slid over her as if she were nothing but a shadow. Lena stood frozen, her hands clenched around the silver tray, fighting back the tremors threatening to betray her. Her uniform, crisp black and white, suddenly felt delicate, like a fragile shield between her dignity and humiliation. Eyes, usually bright, were dimmed with pain, but her lips stayed closed, refusing to let a single word escape. From the corner of her eye, she saw the tense faces of the guests. Some showed sympathy, others shock, all holding their breath. An elegant woman in a crimson dress leaned toward her neighbor, while an elderly couple exchanged anxious glances from a table near the back. No one said a word. "Have you ever experienced something this unfair? Before we go on, tell us where you're watching from. Your story matters to Dot." The tension was so sharp that a single word could have set everything off. "Did you hear me or not?" Darren barked, pointing at the waitress with arrogant force. "Said I don't want someone like you serving me. I'm here for excellence, not for some parody of diversity." His words, harsh and jagged, cut through the air like shattered glass. A wave of shock rippled through the room, and even the pianist, frozen, his fingers hovering over the keys, didn't dare play another note. The restaurant's manager, Adrian Lemieux, watched from afar, stunned. He had never imagined witnessing such tension in his own restaurant, especially not right in front of him. Lena's chest tightened. Each breath took more effort than the last. All her life, she had endured hurtful remarks, sometimes masked, often ignored, because of the color of her skin. But never had she faced such raw humiliation, so public, so relentless. As Darren's words struck her like blows, she felt her knees weaken, until a spark lit up in her memory. Her daughter Alina's determined smile, the image of that child, so full of dreams, hoping to one day become a doctor and give their family a better life, rekindled something inside her. "Sir," Lena said in a calm but slightly trembling voice, meeting his furious gaze without looking away, though tears threatened to rise. "If you'd like, I can call the manager so you can share your concerns about the service at your table." Her words, spoken with dignity and restraint, caught Darren off guard. Her composure stood in stark contrast to his cruelty, and several guests exchanged admiring glances. But Darren's rage was out of control. He slammed his fist down on the table, sending a glass of red wine flying, splattering the pristine tablecloth. "I don't need to see the manager. I want you out of this room now. You're a mistake, a disgrace. How dare you stand there like you belong?" He spat, every syllable dripping with contempt. Across the restaurant, eyes grew sharper. There was compassion, anger, and a silent sense of unity. And in that moment, Lena understood she was not alone. Her dignity, and the dignity of so many others like her, was part of a greater fight than this room. A deep decision settled inside her, clearer than ever. This night would change everything. As Darren Whitmore's cruel words echoed in her mind, the image of Alina, her daughter, shone like a bright light through the darkness of her daily life. In this moment of humiliation, Lena remembered why she had sacrificed so much to keep her job at the Looking Glass, a place where prejudice and cutting remarks were part of the atmosphere. Lena Moore's life had never been easy. She had grown up in Glenway, a forgotten neighborhood, in the shadow of Valamont's golden towers. She knew every narrow alley, every crumbling building, and every worn-down sidewalk by heart. From childhood, she had known what it meant to be different. At school, mockery rained down on her. Her teachers constantly questioned her abilities, and suspicious eyes from adults followed her every time she walked into a store. Her parents, simple factory workers, worked tirelessly to give Lena and her two little brothers just enough to fill the fridge and cover the bare essentials. But despite their strength, they had never managed to break the cycle of poverty and prejudice. Lena grew up with a belief carved deep into her soul. Only school and hard work could offer her a way out. She graduated with honors and dreamed of becoming a professional ballet dancer, but life rarely follows the path we plan. At 20, she found out she was pregnant. The result of a relationship with a boy she thought she could trust. A boy who vanished the moment he heard the news. Overnight, she became the target of bitter judgment, sometimes whispered, sometimes shouted down the hallways of her neighborhood. Cruel nicknames followed her in the streets, and gossip stuck to her like a second skin. Still, Lena refused to bow her head. In shame, she believed with all her heart that her child deserved to exist and be loved, even in a world as harsh and unfair as theirs. Alina's birth changed everything. When she saw that tiny face for the first time, she knew she couldn't give up. She had to become stronger than ever. Lena took every job she could find: waitress in rundown diners, nighttime janitor in office buildings, home aide in suburban houses. Every dollar was earned with sweat and sacrifice. But the bills always came faster than the paychecks. Old debts never let her go, clinging to her, like shadows waiting to swallow her whole. But the deepest wounds didn't come from money. They came from the daily stares. The quiet humiliations Lena and her daughter endured in silence. At just 7 years old, Alina had already heard classmates say they wouldn't play with her because she was different. Lena's heart shattered every time she found her daughter curled up in their small bedroom, cheeks soaked with tears, too young to understand how cruel the world could be. Those moments broke her, but they also fed a fierce determination. Alina would never have to face the same pain she had. So when someone offered her a job at the Looking Glass, Lena felt it might be her one chance to truly change their lives. The Looking Glass wasn't just a fancy restaurant for the powerful. It was known for its ruthless hiring standards, and the fact that they had even considered hiring a black woman like Lena was almost unheard of. ***. From her very first day, Lena understood she would have to work twice, maybe even 3 times harder than her coworkers, just to earn a little recognition. As soon as she started at the Looking Glass, she noticed the subtle, but unmistakable, signs of bias. Sudden silences in the break room, smiles that never reached her, conversations that died the moment she walked in. Out on the floor, some customers looked away, others greeted her with cold, forced politeness when she approached their table. But Lena refused to let doubt take over. Every morning she woke up 2 hours earlier than needed, ironed her uniform with care, rehearsed her movements in front of the mirror, reviewed the daily menu and memorized every wine on the list, like a student before an exam. She believed that with discipline and perseverance, she could force the world to see past the color of her skin. But that night, Darren Whitmore's outburst of rage hit her like a hammer. In an instant, he crushed years of effort, of quiet patience, of hard, invisible work. For the first time, Lena felt truly defeated, not just wounded by the insults, but shaken deep in something she thought untouchable: her dignity. Standing there, in one of the most prestigious restaurants in Valley, she realized a choice lay before her. She was at a crossroads, but she didn't want to. She couldn't let a man like Darren Whitmore define her worth or her future, however dark the road ahead. She had sworn to stay standing, because beyond the humiliation, her little girl Alina still needed her, whole, strong, and free. Every single day at the Looking Glass had become a constant test, a measure of Lena's patience and resilience. She wore her uniform with quiet grace, kept a composed, professional demeanor, but behind the mask, her heart clenched at every whispered comment, every condescending glance. From the very beginning, she knew they didn't see her as one of them. The others laughed together, shared easy conversations, relaxed in their silent bond. But the moment she walked in, the laughter stopped, voices dropped, as if her presence alone disrupted everything. Some turned their heads away, others pretended to focus hard on their tasks, as if trying to erase her existence. Still, Lena tried to smile, to talk, to build a connection. But in return, she received little more than a quick nod, short answers, and eyes that never really met hers. One afternoon, as she quietly walked down the hallway, she overheard a conversation between 2 co-workers, Elodie and Maureen, unaware that she was just behind them. From her very first day at the Looking Glass, Lena knew she would have to work 2 or 3 times harder than her co-workers just to be accepted. It wasn't about skill, it was about perception. She sensed it, within hours, the subtle but painful signs of rejection. Coffee breaks that went silent when she walked in, conversations that stopped mid-sentence, hesitant glances, and that cold distance that hung in the air every time she approached a table. But Lena refused to let doubt take hold. Every morning, She rose long before dawn, pressed her uniform with care, practiced her gestures in the mirror, reviewed the menu down to the last comma, and even studied food and wine pairings like a seasoned sommelier. She truly believed that discipline would eventually open people's eyes, that perseverance would speak louder than the color of her skin. But that night, Darren Whitmore's outburst hit like a slap against all her years of struggle. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt exhaustion creeping into her heart. It wasn't just the violence of his words, it was the way they shattered something inside her, the belief that, despite everything, there was still room for dignity. Standing there in the luxurious dining room of the Looking Glass, surrounded by white tablecloths and glittering chandeliers, Lena realized she was facing a choice. She would not allow one man, or a world full of contempt, to define her worth. However dark the road might be, she had promised her daughter she would never give in, because she knew, better than anyone, that her little Alina still needed her, strong, standing, and whole. Each day spent in that restaurant had become an inner trial, a constant fight to protect her patience, her calm, and her dignity. On the outside, she wore her professionalism like armor. Her posture was upright, her voice confident. But inside, every cold comment, every suspicious glance, cut into her like an invisible wound. From the very beginning, Lena had understood she would never truly be one of them. In the break room, laughter filled the air, but when she walked in, faces closed off, conversations froze, as if she had disturbed some delicate balance. Some looked away. Others pretended to dive into their work, ignoring her completely. Still, she forced smiles, offered a few words, hoping to build a connection. But all she got in return were brief replies, mechanical gestures. One day, as she passed through the hallway, she accidentally overheard a conversation between Maureen and Elodie. They hadn't realized she was there. The crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling cast a golden light, making the perfectly set tables sparkle. The staff moved quickly between guests, each gesture revealing growing tension. Adrien Lemieux, usually the unshakable director of the Looking Glass, paced nervously across the dining room. The moment he spotted Lena, he hurried over and whispered into her ear, his voice lower than usual. "Lena, we have a very important guest tonight. Darren Whitmore booked a table last minute." Lena felt her breath catch in her throat. Of course she knew that name. A notorious tycoon in Valimont, famous for his openly racist remarks. "I know who he is," she replied calmly. "But he's not at one of my tables, is he?" Adrian shook his head quickly. "No, Lucas is taking care of him. But be very careful. Everything has to be perfect tonight." Lena nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders, but not all of it. A few minutes later, the large doors opened slowly, and Darren walked in like a king surveying his domain. His midnight blue suit looked like it was cut from royal fabric, and his white shirt bore his initials embroidered by hand. Everything about him reeked of arrogant power. 2 bodyguards followed behind him, along with a colleague Alan Spencer. A hush fell over the room. Even the sound of silverware went silent. Adrien greeted him with a professional bow and led him to table 10, the most discreet yet prestigious corner of the restaurant. Across the room, Lena discreetly watched as Darren's gaze swept over the staff with a cold, almost contemptuous stare. Lucas moved quickly, nervously preparing the service, but then dashed disaster. As he turned past the counter, Lucas slipped on a slice of lemon dropped near the kitchen. The tray full of champagne flutes crashed to the floor with a deafening noise, shattering the silence like a gunshot. "Oh," Lucas cried, grabbing his ankle and collapsing to the ground. Adrien turned pale, his eyes darting around in panic before locking on to Lena. "You have to take over," he said tensely. "There's no one else I trust." Lena stared at him, stunned. Then she slowly turned toward Darren, who now locked eyes with her, his gaze so piercing, she felt a chill run down her spine. She knew she couldn't say no, but she also knew she didn't want to do this. She took a deep breath. "All right," she said softly. "I'll do my best." She adjusted her apron, lifted her chin, and walked confidently toward the table, proud of every single step. As she stood before Darren Whitmore, she felt his icy stare scan her like an object up for sale. But Lena stood tall. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore," she said in a soft yet steady voice. "My name is Lena, and I'll be taking care of your table tonight." He stared at her for a long moment, lips curled in an ambiguous smile. "Very well," he finally said. "I hope you know what you're doing. I have no patience for mistakes." Those sharp words hit Lena like a slap straight to the face. She knew instantly this night would be different from all the others. Maybe even the hardest of her life. Once again, she thought of Alina, her daughter, her light, and silently vowed not to let anyone, not even Darren Whitmore, break the strength she had built. From the moment she introduced herself, she had seen the contempt in his eyes. A thinly veiled disgust, hiding behind a mask of false politeness. Darren hadn't bothered to hide his surprise, or his disapproval, when he realized his server was a black woman. He tilted his head slightly, scanning her from head to toe, as if her very presence in such a refined place somehow violated the natural order of things. "And what did you say your name was?" he asked in a syrupy tone, each syllable dripping with condescension. "I'm Lena, sir," she replied in a steady voice, forcing calm while a storm raged inside her. "I'll be your main server this evening." He squinted, then gave a crooked, mocking smile. "Lena, what a lovely name. You know, I've dined in Geneva, in Tokyo, in the most prestigious restaurants, and it's quite rare to see people like you allowed to serve in such places." The words chilled her to the bone. People like you. But she showed nothing. Her posture straightened. "Sir, I've received thorough training to meet the high standards of the Looking Glass. I'm confident I can offer you and your guests a service worthy of your expectations." He chuckled. "Really? Then I can't wait to see where this so-called excellence ranks." He glanced at Alan Spencer, who looked away in discomfort. The bodyguards stayed silent in the shadows. Throughout the meal, Darren seized every opportunity to test her patience. When she brought the wine he requested, he examined the label with exaggerated scrutiny, then let out a mocking sigh. "I'm honestly surprised you managed to open a bottle without blowing it up. The Looking Glass must have invested a small fortune to train someone like you." Lena felt her pride falter. Her hands trembled for just a moment, but she poured the wine with elegance and precision. "Sir, my training was just as rigorous as everyone else's here," she replied calmly, each word laced with quiet strength. But Darren didn't ease up. When she brought the appetizers, he stared at the plate, then looked up at her with that same insolent grin. "I hope you're not going to spill anything on me. I've had clumsy servers before, and I can't stand having a dinner ruined." That's when Lena understood. This wasn't simple rudeness, it was deliberate. A carefully staged humiliation. And others saw it. Some guests lowered their eyes. Others peeked over at her, but no one said a word. Her heart burned with shame, and a deep hunger for justice. Still, she stood tall, her voice never breaking. "I assure you, sir, you won't be disappointed." Darren leaned back in his chair, his eyes sparkling with obvious cynicism. "Oh, I already am. But that's quite all right. Over time, I've learned not to expect much from anyone." Minutes dragged by, heavy and suffocating. He criticized everything. The way the napkin was folded, how Lena presented the menu, even her walk. Every comment, even the quiet ones, carried the same cruel message. "You don't belong here." As she stepped into the kitchen to retrieve the main course, Lena heard him whispering to Alan Spencer. "You see, this is why I always ask for more appropriate servers. She can't even get the basics right. It's pathetic. The Looking Glass sacrifices quality for the sake of looking inclusive." Each word hit like a punch to the chest. Leaning against the wall, Lena placed a hand over her heart. Her dignity bruised, shaken, was screaming at her to walk away. But she refused to give Darren that victory. She took a breath, smoothed out her uniform, and picked up the perfectly arranged plate. Carrying the porcelain dish as if it were made of glass. She returned to the dining room. Silence fell over the space. All eyes turned to table 10, where Darren Whitmore sat, like a self-crowned king. "Sir, here is the dry-edged beef fillet you ordered. I hope it's to your liking." He examined the meat, then looked up at her with a new, piercing intensity. "You know, Lena, I've been thinking. You don't belong here." A chill ran through the room. Conversations died. Forks froze mid-air. Everyone was listening. "I get it. The restaurant wants to look modern, so they hire people who clearly aren't qualified. It's all about appearances, nothing more." His acidic voice echoed across the white tablecloths, and the stunned faces. Lena felt her throat tighten. She understood exactly what he meant. He wasn't attacking her work. He was attacking her place in the world, her humanity. And yet, she did not lower her eyes. "Sir," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'm here because I worked for it. Because I earned this job. Every single member of this team was hired for their skill, not for the color of their skin." Darren scoffed with disgust. "Oh, come now. Don't be naive, girl. You're here to make your boss feel good. You're here to be an example. You really think a girl like you was made to serve someone like me? That was the final blow. Something deep inside, Lena stirred awake. Something unshakable. She lifted her head. Her eyes met Darren's. She didn't look away. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice ringing like a church bell in an empty hall. "You can buy a cut of meat, but you'll never buy kindness." And in that suspended silence, Lena Moore stood her ground before a stunned dining room, where for the first time respect filled the air without a single word needing to be spoken. Asterisk. Despite Darren's anger and his threats to ruin her reputation, Lena stood her ground, refusing to accept contempt as something she had to live with. Her inner strength made some people uncomfortable, but it also earned her deep respect, and a new kind of pride, within herself and from those around her. Adrien, the manager of the looking glass, reminded her of the potential consequences. But Lena kept asking herself, how much longer must we bow down to those who believe they hold all the power? When Darren returned to the restaurant in the days that followed, his threats grew even more aggressive. But Lena calmly answered, "I'll never regret standing up for my dignity." Little by little, support began to grow. Customers, co-workers, even strangers. Many saw in her a symbol of courage. But fear didn't disappear. Threats still loomed, even reaching her daughter, Alina Adrien, and especially Patrice, the restaurant's owner, offered her unconditional protection. She was no longer alone. Lena's story spread like wildfire. On social media, in the news, a national conversation began about discrimination in elite spaces. But with the spotlight came the shadows, hate messages, threats, harassment. Still, Lena stood tall, with support from Patrice, Adrien, and even powerful allies like entrepreneur Thomas Blake. She became the face of a movement. She became the spokesperson for a new initiative, Rise, a program built to defend the rights of vulnerable workers and fight silent discrimination. At conferences, interviews, and events, Lena spoke with a calm but powerful voice. She shared her story with humility, rooted in self-respect, resilience, and compassion. Her journey inspired thousands, then millions across the globe. And despite Darren Whitmore's ongoing attacks, the Rise movement became a symbol, a call for justice, a collective answer to quiet injustice. At the official launch of the initiative, Lena spoke with emotion. "This fight isn't mine alone. It belongs to everyone who has ever been silenced." The room rose in applause. Plot leaders, citizens, young people all standing with her. Lena Moore, once invisible, had become a symbol of dignity. Her journey from waitress to icon of resistance proved that one person's voice can shake the walls of injustice, and her message still echoes today. What about you? Would you stand for what's right, even when everything feels lost? If this story moved you, share it. And subscribe for more inspiring stories, because every voice can make a difference.